Okay, let's see if we can get the guys in South St. Paul back on board. Josh?
Yes.
Back up on board.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Text me or call me back. Let me know if it's working.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Wonder why it's backwards though. It's a mirror image, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that somebody's joined us, so hopefully it's those of you in South St. Paul. Apologize for the technical difficulties. Okay, back to the handout. So to get your CDL permit, you need a regular car license. You can't have any suspensions in another state, unpaid tickets in other states. That would prevent you from getting the permit. You need the certified copy of your birth certificate. That means the birth certificate has a little embossed stamp on it. A valid passport would take the place of the birth certificate, okay? All right, the manual is available online, mindriveinfo.org, or you can go through our website. I like the online version of the manual because it allows me to search for the things I'm looking for. I like the search engine because it is very specific to what you've typed in. In other words, when you type in something in the plural, it'll find only those plural items. It won't find singular versions of whatever it is you've typed in. So I like the search engine. Now, the green book that we've given you has every section you need to study for Class A or B. For Class A, you need to study sections 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. For Class B, sections 1, 2, 3, and 5. And what's in here is 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. We have not put section 4 in here. That's for buses. We have not included sections 7, 8, and 9. Those are for endorsements, double, triple tanker, and hazmat. Sections 9, 10, 11, and 12 are for the testing process, the pre-trip inspection, and then the driving process, okay? So that's what those sections are for, and they're not included. But if you want the complete manual, then go online, and you can find it there, all right? On this form, I've also included a website that we're recommending for you to go to for practice test, cdltest.co, not com, .co. Now, there are an abundance of websites out there. I highly recommend cdltest.co as the best one to go to. Again, there are many choices out on the internet for YouTube videos and practice tests, and this is the one that I am recommending. It's not perfect, but dang near. And we've had experience in the past with other practice websites that aren't accurate, and I've had literally hundreds of people come to me over the years and say, yeah, I don't understand. I go take these practice tests and I pass the practice test, but then I go take the real thing and I fail the sucker. What's going on? Well, if the practice test isn't accurate, it's not helping you. So make sure that you go to cdltest.co. The rules that we operate under, being licensed in both states, we are prohibited from duplicating state tests. So I can't do what cdltest.co does. I'm prohibited from creating a practice test that's the exact same thing as the real deal. So maybe that's why CDL test deviates just a little bit from the real test. That's pure conjecture on my part, but that's the one I'm recommending. Then the other thing that you'll see on the handout, the manual is available online. Now, what's interesting about that is the length of each chapter. Now, you go to that through mndriveinfo.org. Those of you in South St. Paul can see what I'm doing here on the screen. But the manual is available online, okay?
Model Commercial Driver License Manual, 2005 CDL Testing Model, July 2010.
So it reads you the manual. Now, notice that section 1 in the manual is 41 minutes. Section 3 is the shortest. That's only 13 minutes. So that's about an hour, right? Section 5 is 45 minutes. So now you're at an hour and 45. Section 6 for you A drivers, another 40-some minutes. So now you're at 2.5 hours. Now look at how much time it takes for the manual. Let's show people in South St. Paul what's going on. Hang on, I got to ditz with my cord here just a little bit. There we go. So look at section 3. Excuse me. I want to go to section 2. It's 3 hours and 15 minutes. You're looking at 6 hours worth of study to get through these 5 sections. 6 hours worth of reading. Now, how many people are going to spend 6 hours reading that manual? Not very many, okay? And that's why people are failing the test. They're just not willing to spend the time to read the thing, all right? All right, let me get my handout back up on the screen so I can see it here. Hang on a second. All right. So as the handout indicates, right? One test on any one subject is allowed per day. I'm going to ask Josh if there's any of you over in Minnesota, if you're Wisconsin residents, because things are a little different there. So I'm going to text Josh, and he'll come in the room and ask that question. It makes things a little simpler if you're all Minnesotans, but we'll figure that out. All right, so in Minnesota, 1 permit test in any one subject allowed per day. That's true in Wisconsin also. Now in Minnesota, your first and second attempt at these permit tests is free. If you fail any subject twice, when you come back for that third one, it will cost you $10. Okay? You can take it as many times as you want. But each time it'll cost you that additional $10. Now, for the person in South St. Paul that's a Wisconsin resident, they don't charge you for subsequent tests in Wisconsin, but they limit it to 5. You get 5 shots at it. If you can't pass it in 5 shots, then you're not allowed to retest for a year. Okay? There are people in Minnesota that, since the number of tests are unlimited, there are people that don't study the manual at all. They just go keep taking the test, and they'll take it 10 or 15 times before they pass the thing. I'd suggest you study the manual and pass it the first time. All right, next paragraph on the handout. The test in Minnesota is available on paper or with a computer. And that's the exact verbatim language in the manual. The test is available on paper or with a computer. Now, let me tell you guys, in Minnesota, you go into one of the metro exam stations that have the computers. The outstate ones don't. The smaller exam stations do not have the computers. If you go to one of the exam stations that has the computers, they have a policy that says you have to take it on the computer. Now, the computer does have headphones that will read you the questions. I don't personally see the value of that. The reason is when I take a test, my biggest downfall is I jump to conclusions too quickly. I don't take the time that I should to really read through the question. And part of what I would suggest to you is that the way the questions are written, they're written in such a way to try to create confusion, to try to get people to fail this thing. If you had a test and everybody passed it, what good would it be? It wouldn't be a good test. And so that's how these bureaucrats look at this. They want a test where at least some people are failing the thing. Okay? And Minnesota actually monitors not only the percentage of pass-fail, they actually on the computer monitor the percentage of correct and incorrect answers to every single question. And so if they got a question in this computer system where everybody's getting it right, they will change it. If they have a question that everybody's getting it wrong, they'll change that one. Now, my biggest downfall when I take these tests are when I get questions that say, which one of the following is false? Now, I mentioned to some of you here yesterday, I believe, I'm dyslexic, okay? That confuses the daylights out of me. How can the wrong answer be the correct answer? See, that's what they're asking me. Which one of these is false? So I'm looking for the wrong answer to identify it as the correct answer. And my brain just does not get along with that process. That's oil and water, okay? It's just really, really difficult for me to sync up with that. Ask me any question you want about the rules, and I can give you the answer. Ask me how far away you have to be from a fire hydrant to legally parked. I know the answer. I don't need a multiple guess quiz for me to find the correct answer. I know what the correct answer is. Anybody else know? 10 feet. How far away from a stop sign? 30 feet. How many feet away from a railroad crossing? 50 feet. How far in advance of an intersection are you required to signal a turn? 100 feet. Okay? I know all those rules. I know what the statutes are. I know what the statutory speed limits are. I know the rules. So I could sit down, pass any test you want to give me, as long as I could write down the correct answer. Ask me a question, I'll give you the answer. But that's not what they do. They do these multiple guess quizzes, true and false and multiple guess. And again, sometimes they ask you the negative. And so if I'm listening to a headphone, that actually hinders me rather than helping me, because I got to slow my brain down to really think through some of these questions. As another example, they'll ask, what is the proper tread depth for tires other than the front tires? Now, if my brain hears proper tread depth front tires, the correct answer is what? 430 seconds. But what was the question? Other than front tires. So what's the correct answer? 230 seconds. So if my brain doesn't hear other than, but it does hear tread depth front tires, I get the wrong answer. So I don't like the computer headphones. There's something else I don't like about the computer in Minnesota. Now, whoever's over there that's from Wisconsin, in Wisconsin, the computer will allow you to skip questions. In Minnesota, it does not. And I don't like that for two big reasons. First of all, if I get stumped on a question, in Minnesota, I'm stuck with it. I can't skip it and come back to it later. I have to answer it. That's the only way I can go forward, okay? In Wisconsin, you can skip. Now, you got to come back to it, but you can skip questions and go on and find the next one. The Minnesota computer system is capable of doing that. But when they boot it up in the morning, the operator gets a prompt. Allow skipping or not, and they choose not to. Why? I don't know. I don't understand these people at the Department of Public Safety in Minnesota. They're such jerks. As an example, there is a federal rule that says if your permit expires, you're allowed to renew it once without redoing the tests. and who's ever there in our office in South St. Paul for Wisconsin, that's exactly what Wisconsin will do for you. Guess what the rest of you Minnesotans are going to have to do to renew your permit? Take a test that's not required by the federal rules. Why? What is the purpose in that? I mean, do these people have a thorn in their paw and they're just trying to go out and get everybody because they're ornery? I don't get it. I don't understand them. So the computer in Minnesota does not allow you to skip questions. The other thing I don't like, it's not that big of a deal, but I don't like that the computer scores you instantaneously. So if you get a wrong answer, it'll tell you right then and there. And the way my little brain works is like, oh, that distracts me. So I would prefer not to know, kind of that ignorance is bliss thing. That's where I'm coming from. So I don't like the computer. In Wisconsin, you have no choice, to my knowledge. I don't think they have a paper version in Wisconsin, but that's okay. The Wisconsin one does allow you to skip. Now, because the Wisconsin computer allows him to skip over there, no matter how many he gets wrong, he's going to see all the questions. You Minnesotans, if you're taking the computer question, the computer quiz, you have to get 80% correct. It will terminate your test as soon as you fail. The general knowledge test, you're going to have to take 3 tests. General knowledge, air brakes, and combinations for Class A. If you're doing Class B, it'd be general knowledge and air brakes. You got to get 80% on each one of them. If you're taking the general knowledge test, that's 50 questions, which means you can only get 8 wrong. If you get more than 8 wrong, so you get a 9th wrong, you fail the test. Well, let's say you're having a bad day, and out of the first 20 questions, you get 9 wrong. It shuts the machine off. You'll only see 20 questions. And see here again, the person from Wisconsin, by skipping questions, they can make sure they see every one of those 50 questions. You Minnesotans won't see them unless you go all the way to the last question, all right? By getting 8 wrong up to that point. So now the manual comes right out and says the test is available on paper or with a computer. Keyword there being or. I like the paper version. Why? I can skip questions. I will see all of the questions. I'll see every single one of them. So if I do fail, at least I've seen all the questions. The computer version will be different every time you take it because the computer is mixing up questions. The paper version has 2. There are 2 versions to the paper. So if you were to take it 3 times, you will see the same test twice. Nobody's standing over you scoring it, so you're not going to know until the end of whether you passed it or not. To me, that takes some pressure off. So I much prefer the paper version as to the computerized version in Minnesota. However, if you go to one of the exam stations that has the computer, they will tell you you have to take it on the computer. Now, the manual says that you can do it either way. There are 92 places in the state of Minnesota where you can take one of these knowledge tests. Only about a dozen of them have computers. So all of the metro exam stations plus like Duluth and Rochester, those places, all right? But Stillwater only has the paper versions. What I'm suggesting is if you want to go to one of the larger exam stations that has the computers, go ahead and ask for the test on paper. They will refuse. When they refuse, I would suggest that you very politely and courteously ask to see a supervisor. The supervisor will make you wait at least a half hour, if not 45 minutes, just because they can. And finally, they'll come out and they'll explain to you, we have a policy that says that you take it on the computer the first time. If you fail it, then maybe we'll let you take it on the paper the second time. To that person, I would say, now, as I understand it, there are 92 places in the state of Minnesota to take this test. Correct? And they may vacillate and say, well, I'm not sure. Well, I can show you on your website if you'd like. You want to boot your website up on the internet? I'll show you. You have 92 places to take this test. And only a dozen of them or so, but less than 20 places in the state of Minnesota have the computers. The rest of them have the paper. So that means that there are people taking this test for the first time in the state of Minnesota on paper. Now, if someone else can take this on paper the first time, then if you're going to honor the United States Constitution and the Minnesota Constitution, I have every right to take it on paper myself. I'd like the paper one, please. I'll wait. At that point, they'll probably say, did you go to that damn interstate truck driving school? All right, here's your paper one. Now, why don't they want to give it to you on paper? Because they have to score it manually. It takes them all of at least, my God, at least 45 seconds to take the score grid, put it over your test, and score you, as opposed to a keystroke on a computer. So that's what's going on, right? It frustrates me that we have a government agency that doesn't comply with the United States Constitution. And on my watch, they do, okay? So just a heads up, be polite, be professional, and courteous. If you raise your voice, they'll throw you out. I can tell you that. I've been thrown out, okay? All right. Next item on the checklist, you must arrive at least an hour before they close. These exam stations, if they close at 4:30, they lock the doors at 3:45. What kind of business does that? A government one, okay? You have to get there well in advance of closing time to take the test. Once you're there and testing, the only limit is their closing time. So if you were still testing at 4:20, they would force you to stop and get out of the building, okay? But that's the only time limit. As far as locations, MnDriveInfo.org will tell you where the locations are to take your test. Next paragraph. You can take one subject at a time if that works best for you. So you can go in on Monday and take a test, go back on Tuesday and take a test, whatever works best for you. You can even do that within the same day. You do not have to take the 3 tests required to get the Class A in a single setting. You could separate it. You could go in first thing and take your general knowledge test, tell them I'll be back, go out in the parking lot, study for a while, come back in, okay, I'd like to take my next test. That's fine. Now, this brings to mind how important it is to document things when you interact with this agency from the state of Minnesota, okay? Be very anal about this. Don't go take a test, pass the thing, and walk out the building without something in writing that says that you passed the test. If they won't give you a copy of it, take a picture of it, okay? Here's my fear. You go in at 8:30, you take the general knowledge test. Takes you an hour. 9:30, you say, I'll be back a little bit. I'm going to go study for the next part. Fine, the clerk says. I'll hold on to your paperwork. I'll be right here when you get back. So you step out. 5 minutes later, that person gets a phone call from their daycare center, and their kid is sick. Where are they going? They're leaving. Okay, you come back in a half hour later. Yeah, I was here earlier. I passed my general knowledge. I want to take the next thing now. Oh, well, we don't seem to have your paperwork. Do you have a copy of it? No, I don't have a copy. Clerk said she was going to hang on to it for me. Well, gee, I don't know. I don't see it. I was here an hour ago. I passed the thing. Well, if you passed it once, you can pass it again real easy. Go take the test again. That's what they'll make you do. Okay. And this brings to mind, track every piece of paper you get from these people. And when you get your license in the mail, check it very carefully. Not only the front, but the back. This is an important document to you. This is a very, very important document. This is what allows you on airplanes. This is what allows you to cross the border. And they are screwing this stuff up. And they're doing it on a regular basis. We had a customer recently. He goes to get his permit. So he goes and takes the permit test, okay, passes all that, goes up to the counter to actually get the permit now. And, okay, let me see your license. Here's my license. And, oh, by the way, Edina is misspelled on here. He lived in Edina, and they had misspelled it. And the clerk says, oh, well, we got to fix that. Okay. All right, well, let's do this. Okay, fill this out. Okay, sign that. Okay. They punch his license void, hand it back to him with a piece of paper that says he's applied for a duplicate license with the correction. And then they tell him this. Now, when you get the new license in the mail, then you can come back and get your permit. Wait a minute. I just passed the permit test. Can't I get the permit now? Nope. Why not? Because Edina is misspelled on your license. Can you believe that? And in Minnesota, how long does it take to get a new one of these suckers?
So they told me 4 to 6 weeks. It took 5 months.
It took 5 months. And that's what's happening to people, okay? So do you understand how important it is to check this stuff? So when that guy got his license in the mail, he should have checked it first thing and made us think about it. I've had customers that have restrictions on the back of their license. They don't see it. We had a customer that was restricted, no air brakes. He took a test with air brakes. Every single one of our test trucks got air brakes. But he gets pulled over in a normal inspection in Wisconsin. Trooper says, son, you can't drive this truck. Excuse me, officer? Look right here, son. No air brakes. Geez, officer, I didn't know that. I've been driving for 1.5 years. Well, you've been driving illegally for 1.5 years. That truck is parked right there, son. You can't move that truck. You better call somebody. They wouldn't let him drive the truck because he had a restriction. He didn't pick that up. Get this story. This just makes me crazy. So we had a customer, and the reason I'm spending time with this is I want to emphasize how important it is that you document your stuff, okay? So this young man took a road test June 21st, 2017 at the Egan exam station at 12:30 in the afternoon. He passed it. Now, you need your certified birth certificate to get your license. Even though you already presented it to get your permit, you got to re-present it to get your license. You'll have to re-present it every time you renew your license. So he passes the test. The examiner says, you know, congratulations, you passed your test. They go over some things that he did wrong. And then the examiner hands him the paperwork and says, okay, so you can go in and get your license. And this young man says, do I need my certified birth certificate? Yeah, you need that. Oh, I don't have that. Well, that's okay. Just, you know, go get it and bring it back and you can do it later. Well, can I do it someplace else? Sure, anywhere you want. Well, I live by Chaska. Can I go to Chaska? Well, absolutely. Just go to Chaska, bring them the paperwork, you'll be fine. Now, the reason I know about this conversation is that we have dash cameras in our trucks. And those dash cameras are working during the test in Minnesota only because I sued the state of Minnesota over that. When I put cameras in the fall of 2011, they pushed back. Not only did they tell me that I can't do that, they also tried to put me out of business because I did it. Honest to God, I got a letter from the state of Minnesota that says you're shut down for 365 days. The school license is suspended, your license is suspended, everybody that works for you, all suspended for 365 days. Because I had the audacity to exercise my constitutional rights without asking permission. I pushed back. The good news is in the United States, we have this thing called due process. They didn't put me out of business, obviously. And I got a judge to agree that the cameras are on. So I got a camera videotaping this whole conversation between this examiner and this young man. Okay, so a month later, in July, he gets a letter from the state of Minnesota. It says, you applied for a Class A license. There's no record of your road test. You need to take a road test and successfully pass it before you're allowed to get a Class A license. Go take a road test. You're kidding, he says. He goes to Chaska. Look at this letter. They look him up in the computer. Yep, no road test. Dude, I took a road test last month on the 21st at Egan. We'll go to Egan then. So he drives over to Egan. Look at this letter. Yep, no road test. Dude, I took a road test here June 21st, last month at 12:30 in the afternoon. Nope, you didn't. What do you mean I didn't? Yes, I did. Do you have the record of your passing the road test? He had lost that or put it through a wash or something. but he did not have the piece of paper that the examiner gave him to show him that he had passed his test. And that's my point, is that you must keep those documents to protect you down the road, okay? So he drives over to our school and he says, guys, look at this letter. We're like, you know, state of Minnesota does this garbage all the time. Well, do you have a copy of that score sheet? And we looked at his file. He didn't come back and show it to us, so we didn't have a copy of it. What am I going to do? So I said, wait a second. Let's go back and see if we can find the video of your test and see if we can find proof that you passed. So we go back and we look and we find this whole conversation between the two of them. So what I did was I played it on a monitor for him and I had him videotape that video with his cell phone. And I said, go back to Egan and show him the video. So he goes back to Egan. He goes in there and he goes, I got video proof I passed this test. Oh, we don't care about that. Go back to Chaska. They're the ones that messed it up. He drives to Chaska. I got video proof I passed the test. Hey, it ain't our fault. It's Egan that did this. Go back to Egan. He's at Egan for the third time in the same day. Would you be mad by now? And he goes in there and he says, I got video proof I passed this test. And they said, we don't care. I don't care about your video. I'm not looking at your video. So he calls from there. He says, they won't even look at it. I said, find out who the supervisor is. Very calmly, professionally, talk to the supervisor and tell the supervisor that if she isn't willing to look at this video and resolve this problem, you're going to call me, let me know that. I'm going to do two things. First thing I'm doing is I'm going to call my attorney. His name's Paul Applebaum. So she can be expecting a call from him. And then as soon as I hang up from leaving him a message, I can never get a hold of him. As soon as I leave him a message, I'm going to call my friends at KSTP Television, where I advertise. So I've got some connections there. And I'm going to get a hold of the news department and tell them this story and try to talk them into coming out and interviewing you there at the Egan Exam Station and show the Twin Cities news market the video that they won't look at. He calls me back about 10 minutes later. It's taken care of now. Isn't it crazy that I have to threaten to do that for them to look at the stupid video of their employee telling this guy he passed his test? And that same examiner, and you can tell I'm getting a little hot under the collar, this makes me angry. That same guy is still there and he's still messing stuff up. We have seen people get Class B licenses when they took an A test. We've seen it the opposite. People get A's when they took a B test. We've seen people get restrictions to automatic when they tested with manuals. We've seen it the other way around. They test with automatic and an unrestricted license. So it's not like they're doing it in a mean, vindictive way. It's just they're incompetent. And this same guy that messed him up 2 years ago is still there, still screwing people up. Has he been disciplined? Suspended? Hell, he's probably going to get promoted someday. So my point is, document, document, document. Take pictures. Don't lose this stuff. Okay? All right. Last item on the checklist. CDL Medical Self-Certification Form. Take the handout I've given you, flip it to the back page, please. That is the CDL Medical Self-Certification Form. You are required to fill out a medical self-certification form when you get your permit. So it's required, and this is by federal rule that requires this. On this medical form, you have to certify that you fit into one of 4 categories. So see where it says category 1, 2, 3, and 4? Category 1 and 2 are for interstate. Category 3 and 4 are intrastate. In other words, staying within the state of Minnesota. Who would need to be in the intrastate category? 2 types of people. First of all, under age 21. Drivers that are 18, 19, and 20 cannot cross state lines in a commercial motor vehicle. So they are intrastate drivers. The other person that's going to gravitate towards intrastate is a person that cannot pass a DOT physical with the interstate threshold. the threshold to pass a physical is lower for an intrastate driver than an interstate driver. Example, on the interstate side, you have to see 20/40 in both eyes, correction allowed, but you have to see 20/40 in both eyes to pass a interstate DOT physical. You can get by with 20/40 in one eye for intrastate. There are some others, but that's the primary example, okay? Now, the difference between Category 1 and Category 2 is Category 1 means it's required. Category 2 means it's not required. Who is required to have a DOT physical? Anybody getting paid in the private sector to drive a commercial vehicle. There are some government jobs where you do not need a DOT, and you wouldn't need a DOT physical to drive a truck for personal reasons. Why might you want to drive a truck for personal reasons? I had a friend of mine, this guy's family has a construction business. And so this is the son of the guy that started it. They got some money. This is a family that's got some resources. And this friend of mine works in management. He does not want to pick up a hammer. Okay? He wants to stay in the management side. And he's got a bunch of land, and where his house is located, he doesn't have many trees, but he's got another piece of property over yonder with a whole bunch of nice trees. So he called up a guy with one of those tree spades, you know, them trucks that dig trees out of the ground. Called him up and said, how much would you charge me to move like 40 trees? Well, it was a lot of money. So this guy comes to me and he says, so Bill, I found a used truck tree spade, and I figure I could buy this thing. It needs a little work. So if I put the work into it, I probably can move all my trees and sell the thing and get all my money out of the deal. Now, do I need a CDL to drive this truck around? And I go, yeah. Well, even in my driveway? I go, yeah. If your driveway doesn't have a fence and a gate closing it off from the public roads, that means it's public access. So your driveway is a public road by definition. Even though it's private property? Yeah, because it's open. Now put a fence around your property, put a gate at the end and lock it. Then you can drive around anything you want. It doesn't matter. But if you can drive to where you are from a public road, that's public access. You got to have your CDL. All right. Well, what about the medical and the hours of service and all them their rules? Nope, you don't have to follow that, Andy, as long as you're doing this purely for personal use. Now, you can't sell any trees. The minute you sell the tree with this truck, now you're commercial and the commercial rules apply. Okay? So you got to stick to just moving your trees on your property for your benefit. So that is an example of personal use. You do not need a DOT medical to do that. That puts you in the exempt category, okay? The point to this discussion is you can get your permit without the medical. However, a lot of these examiners will push back on you. Don't you have your medical? Not yet. So here's my form. Well, you got to have the medical. Well, what are you getting a license for if you ain't going to get the medical? And to that person, I would say very politely, that's none of your concern. Here's my form. Okay? What you do with a license is none of their business. But some of them stick their nose in your business. If you don't have the medical, just check exempt. Now, you need the medical to get a job, right? So let's say that you get your license. You go in to get a job. Yeah, I'm here to apply for the job. Here's my license. Do you have your medical? No, I don't have that yet. Well, go get it. There's a guy right down the street that's certified to do that. Go down there and get back here ASAP, and we'll get you going. An hour later, you're back there with a passed medical, and you're good to go. That's how quickly you can get this medical. It's not that big of a deal. It's a very minor exam. They check blood pressure. You do pee in a cup, and for that, they are checking for high blood sugar and blood in your urine. They'll check your vision, hearing, make sure you don't have any missing limbs, some manual dexterity things. It's a pretty simple exam, okay? Now, once you have the medical, then the next step is you have to share that with the state. If you look at this form, you see right on here it says current medical examiner certificate from certified medical examiner must be submitted to do it in the non-exempt category, okay? It has to be done by a medical practitioner that is registered with the feds. Now, this is one of the things that changed several years ago. It used to be we only had to carry a health card in our wallet, and it didn't matter where you got it. And so the bottom line, there were fraudulent medical cards, since the truck stops were selling these blank ones for $4. So the feds closed that loophole by requiring that you go to somebody that's registered with them to get this. Then you have to share that with the state of Minnesota. When you share this with the state of Minnesota then knows what the expiration date of this is. Okay? Now, my medical, I explained, those of you that are here in Hudson have heard this, but let me bring this to the table for the people in South St. Paul. Your medical is usually good for 2 years. Now, I'm taking medication for high blood pressure, so I'm a 1-year medical, right? 60 days before my medical expires, I'm going to get a letter from the state of Minnesota reminding me that my medical expires. If I don't recertify by that expiration date, what happens to my Class A CDL? I lose it. Your CDL is taken away from you and you're kicked down to a Class D. Don't forget to recertify on expiration date. Then down the road, let's say that you go through this process. You get your license, you get the medical, let's say you're good for 2 years. So off you go, you get a job. You do that for a year and then something else comes up. You stop driving truck. 10 months later, you get the letter. Your medical is going to expire. And you say to yourself, well, I don't need the medical, I ain't driving the truck. That's true. All you need to do is send this form in again, and this time check exempt. That means you don't need the medical, which is a true statement because you're not driving truck and getting paid. By checking exempt, you'll be able to keep the CDL forever, as long as you renew it every 4 years. In Wisconsin, I think it's every 8 or something. I don't know, 7 or 8 years or something. The license is good for a longer period of time over Wisconsin versus Minnesota. Don't forget to do this, okay? And if you're not using it at the moment, then go into the exempt status, and then you're going to have to pay to renew it. So every 4 years when you renew, it's an extra $20. I think it's worth it. You never know when you're going to use this license or what you might use it for, okay? Maybe you're going to retire and you're going to drive the state fair's coming up. You know Sweet Martha's Cookies? That's a high school friend of mine's wife. And she literally started that because she used to bake really good cookies. And somebody said, you ought to sell those at the state fair. It started out as a lark, okay? So now all these years later, they make a lot of money, don't they? So this friend of mine, this high school classmate friend of mine, married to Martha, literally married to Martha. He works at the state fair like everybody else in the family. And then you know what he does for the rest of the year? He drives a truck for a food drive, a charity. That's kind of cool, isn't it? This guy spends the rest of his year helping out a food drive charity thing, but he needs the CDL to do it. Okay? So you never know when and where you're going to need this CDL or what you're going to use it for. So keep it once you get it. Okay? All right. Let's talk about how to pass this test. Now, I told you that the sections of the manual that you're going to have to study, it's about 6 hours worth of study for Class A, right? This manual is published by an organization called AAMVA, American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, under contract to the federal government. This manual came into existence in the middle 1980s. And those of us that were licensed before the manual, when it came time for renewal, we had to pass this test for the first time. I got my license, my Class A license initially in 1975. So somewhere in the late 80s, when I went to renew my CDL, I had to take this test I had to take this test for the first time. I'd had my CDL for more than 10 years, but I had to take the test. And what was happening is a lot of these experienced drivers being forced to take this test for the first time were failing it. So the feds went back to AMBA, the people that wrote the manual, and they said to them, hey, look, people are struggling with this exam. Is there something that you can do to help people pass the test? And so what they did is they created these test your knowledge boxes. Take your manual, find section 2 down at the bottom, and go to section 2-8. So it's page 2-8. So section 2, driving safely, the 8th page, and you're going to find the first test your knowledge box. See that? All right. These are the questions on your test. These are the questions on your test. Let's look at them. Number 1, what's the most important reason for doing a vehicle inspection? Now, some of these are no-brainers. That's a real simple one. What's the correct answer? Safety. Okay. You can pass that, get that one correct without reading the manual, right? The next question. Name or what things should you check during a trip? Well, what do you think the correct answer is? Say what? Everything?
5 things or the 4 categories of the pre-inspection.
Okay. That's a rather open-ended question, isn't it? I'm going to use the search engine to find the correct answer. So what I did is I just typed in my search box up here, I typed in during a trip, and here it is, during a trip. What's the answer? For safety, you should watch gauges for signs of trouble, use your senses to check for problems. Look, listen, smell, and feel. That is the correct answer. That is the correct answer. Now, here's the deal. Remember I was telling you they write these questions in such a way so as to get people to get them wrong, right? If the question had said, what things should you check when you're actually driving down the road? Y'all have been able to figure it out, wouldn't you? They didn't ask the question that way. They asked the question in a vague, ambiguous way that was so open-ended. So now let's say for the sake of discussion that you take this test, you get this answer wrong, and you decide you want to complain about it because it was so vague and ambiguous. So you go up the counter, well, there was this one question on the test, and there's no way you could know the correct answer. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to turn to this page of the manual and say, you want to bet? Look, it's right there, dude. You didn't read the manual. The correct answers are in the manual. You just got to find them. You can't pass this test with practical knowledge or common sense. You've got to read the manual to pass the test. So the good news here is the test your knowledge boxes zero in on exactly what's on the test. So you don't need to read the manual and study it for multiple hours and study every bit of it. I mean, it's like crib notes. Did you ever use crib notes when you were in school? You know, it focused in on exam questions. I mean, this is 6 hours of reading. If you're really going to study and memorize all of this, how many hours would that take? I mean, 100 hours for crying out loud to memorize this thing. So what I suggest you do, read through the manual. Do that. Read it. But then go back and find these test your knowledge boxes. They're split up in every section in the manual. Find these test your knowledge boxes. Then go back in the section of that box and find the correct answer and highlight it. Now you have the perfect study guide. Third one in our Test Your Knowledge on page 2-8. Name some key steering system parts. That's located on page 2-2. Steering box, pitman arm, drag link, tie rod are steering system parts, okay? On the same page is the answer to the next question. Name some suspension system defects. That includes broken, missing, shifted, or cracked leaf springs, distorted coil springs, leaking shock absorbers, broken spring mounts. Now, incidentally, I've never seen a commercial vehicle with coil springs on them, but I suppose that's a possibility. But coil springs is in the manual, so it's fair game. Okay. Number 5, what 3 kinds of emergency equipment must you have? Anybody know? Fire extinguisher, the triangles. What's the third one? Fire extinguisher, triangles, and what? First aid kit. No, but that would make sense. Wouldn't a first aid kit be a piece of emergency equipment? It would be to me, but that's not it.
It's not flares.
Well, flares and triangles are interchangeable. So one or the other, but not both. Electrical fuses.
Oh, that's right. That video.
Electrical fuses. Now, those of you that are mechanically inclined, Joe, you're mechanically inclined? So if I'm driving a vehicle and an electrical fuse pops, if I have a spare fuse and I put it in, what's going to happen? Most likely it'll pop again. So what good does a fuse do me? Now, if they required me to carry an ohm meter, a test light, spare wire, connectors, soldering iron, shrink wrap, and a torch, okay, because now I can fix the problem. But a spare fuse in and of itself isn't going to solve. It will solve no problem. So it seems stupid to me that we got to carry fuses, but we do. Now, I have about 20 commercial vehicles, okay? I have spare fuses in every single one of them. I have no idea if they fit. I have no idea, nor do I care, because I think it's a ridiculous requirement. I'm complying with the requirement. The requirement doesn't say they have to fit the vehicle. So if a trooper stopped me someday and says, I'm going to give you a ticket for not having the fuses to fit this vehicle, I'll say, okay, I'll see you in court, officer. And then I'm going to put him up on the witness stand, and I'm going to say, okay, here's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations right here. Show me where it says the fuse has to fit the vehicle. Show me that. Well, it ain't in there. Well, why is it you think I'm supposed to have it? Well, so that it fits. Well, why is that? So you can fix it. Fix what? And then I'm going to go into this discussion we just had, and I'm going to tell the judge, Your Honor, it's a ridiculous requirement, and I'm in full compliance with it. Because I have fuses. It doesn't tell me what kind of fuses. It just tells me, it says I have to have fuses, and I have them. So I'm in compliance. I'd love to have that discussion. I'd love to have that discussion. So if there's any troopers out there listening, pull me over. All right. Number 6, what's the minimum tread depth for front tires? 4 seconds. Now, that's how they measure tread depth, is in 32nd of an inch increments. So that's the correct answer. On your road test, make sure you're telling the examiner 4 seconds. If you say 1/8, you will not get credit for it. He's not going to care that 1/8 is equivalent to 4 seconds. He doesn't care. The manual says 4 seconds. If there's a number in the manual, you need to know that number, whatever that number is. Okay? What's the minimum tread depth for other tires? to 30 seconds. Number 7, name some things you should check on the front of your vehicle during the walk-around inspection. It's going to be lights. That's what it tells you, the lights, okay? Number 8, what should wheel bearing seals be checked for? Leaks. Number 9, how many red reflective triangles are you supposed to carry? 3. Carry more if you want, but you have to have 3. One little tidbit of information. A lot of us truck drivers like to carry the triangles and the fire extinguisher in a side box. Why? Because those things are subject to inspection by a trooper, and some of us would prefer the troopers not up in our cab. So if a trooper says to me, I need to inspect your fire extinguisher, your triangles, and your fuses, I'm going to say, no problem, officer. I'm going to hop out of the truck, lock the door, and open up the side cabinet. Now, in my rig that I run over the road with, my triangles are over here on this side. Why? It's a lot safer to get out on this side of the truck than it is this side of the truck, okay? Actually, in my truck, they're in both sides, but I've got a set of triangles over here on this side, okay? That's also where I put the fire extinguisher and the fuses so that I can show them that stuff without inviting them into my cab. Just saying. Number 10, how do you test hydraulic brakes for leaks? There's a formula. Anybody know what the formula is? Pump the brake pedal 3 times. Hold that pedal for 5 seconds. During that time period, the brake pedal should not go down, okay? And you can find that. There it is. I just used the search engine. Took me 5 clicks of the enter button to find how to check for hydraulic leaks. This is on page 2-7. And so what I'm suggesting you do is that you find these questions, go back and find the answer to the question, and highlight it. If you use a combination of this and the online version at the same time, the benefit of the online version with the search engine, Control F, it'll help you find the correct answer quicker than just, okay, now wait a minute, let me look through here. I mean, you can do it that way. You can find the answer by looking through, or use the search engine, you can do it a little quicker. Just trying to help you out so that you don't spend quite as much time at this. When you use that search engine, by the way, right up here in the corner, you'll notice that it tells you how many times that word comes up in the manual. And the benefit to that then is, if it comes up 642 times, you're not going to sit there and hit enter 642 times. So you'd retype in something else to try to find the question you're looking for. You also have to be very careful about what you're typing in. So as an example, on the first question, page 2-8, what's the most important reason for doing a vehicle inspection? Notice they've got the word doing and together without a space. So I wouldn't copy and paste that into my search engine because that's the only place it's misspelled. So I literally typed out doing an inspection. Oop, I didn't put an, I just put a. Now I'll find it. Well, why am I not finding this? Hang on. It's supposed to work. Well, hang on a second. No, it should go forward into it. Hang on. I'm getting myself mixed up. Yeah, for doing a inspection.
Oh, doing it, okay.
Jeez.
Doing a vehicle inspection.
You have to spell it correctly, and that's my problem.
Doing a is one word up there.
I know. That's my point. And I'm showing you that you can't find it if you spell it differently than it's in the manual.
Well, I find it this way, but the other one said doing a vehicle inspection.
And that's not finding it anywhere. Now, the word doing, didn't find it. Okay? So sometimes the question doesn't match up perfectly with the text, so then you would have to scroll back. And that's my point, is that sometimes you have to tweak what you're putting in for a search engine. Now, the next one says, what things did you check during a trip? And there's no space between A and T and a trip. So if you drag and paste that, it wouldn't come up. But if you type in during a trip, it will come up. Okay? And so if I misspell it the way it is in the test your knowledge box, it'll come up there. So you have to tweak what you type in sometimes to find what you're looking for. So you might have to experiment with that a little bit. Okay? All right, number 11 is a no-brainer. Why put the starter switch key in your pocket during a pre-trip inspection? So nobody drives over you while you're underneath the vehicle. All right, the next test your knowledge box is on page 2-10. Number 1, why should you back towards the driver's side? So you can see better. Number 2, if stopped on a hill, how can you start moving without rolling back? Now, the reality is with today's trucks, I don't worry about the truck rolling back. They don't roll back. These diesel trucks with a manual transmission have so much torque to them that if you're on a hill, your foot's on the brake, put the clutch in, put it in gear, let the clutch out enough so that you feel the clutch start to engage, take your foot off the brake. Ease the clutch out nice and smooth, off you go. You don't even have to throttle up if you let the clutch out nice and smooth, because the fuel is electronically managed. And it'll actually supply more fuel into the motor as you release the clutch. You're not driving a 72 Pinto. It's not going to buck and snort and stall on you in the middle of the hill. Well, the manual doesn't know any better because the manual was written back in the 80s. So the correct answer is use your parking brake or use the trailer service brake lever on your dashboard. They're nicknamed Johnny Bar, Johnson Bar, something like that. I don't do either one of those, but having read that in the manual, that's going to be my correct answer. You've got to read the manual to find the correct answer. Now, incidentally, all of these big trucks now, the Class 8 trucks, the big over-the-road rigs, are coming with automated manual transmissions. They're not automatics. They are not Allison automatics with torque converters. They are manual transmissions that are shifted in an automated way with computer controls and pneumatic devices. So the interesting thing about these automated transmissions, when you are sitting at a stop with your foot on the brake, it is in neutral. The truck is not in gear. It is in neutral. When you take your foot off the brake and touch the throttle, it puts it into the appropriate gear and starts to let the clutch out. If you take your foot off the brake and don't touch the throttle, you know what the truck's going to do if you're on a hill? It's going to roll. It'll roll on you. Downhill forward, uphill backwards. Okay? So the proper technique there would be keep your left foot on the brake, touch the throttle just a little bit to get this process to engage. Then take your foot off the brake pedal. Now, they don't talk about that in the manual because the manual has never heard of an automated manual. They have no idea what that is. Again, these are not automatics. They're automated manuals. Okay? Number 3, when backing, why is it important to use a helper? To avoid blind spots. Okay? Number 4, what's the most important hand signal that you and the helper should agree on? Stop. Bonus question. What should you do when backing up when using a helper? What should you do if you lose sight of your helper? Stop. Get out of the truck and go find that person. Okay? What are the 2 special conditions where you should downshift? Prior to going down a hill and prior to going around a curve. Okay? Number 6, when should you downshift automatic transmissions? Prior to going down a hill. The automated and the new automatic transmissions will downshift themselves. My little diesel pickup truck out here with an automatic transmission, it downshifts itself. It does it all by itself. I don't need to do it. But again, this manual was written in the 80s. It doesn't know that. So the correct answer is before you start down a hill. Okay? Number 7, retarders keep you from skidding when the road is slippery. Well, first of all, what's a retarder? Okay, but what is it? It's an internal brake inside the motor. An internal combustion engine has fuel these days injected into it. Anybody remember carburetors? Bob, you probably remember carburetors. These are fuel injected motors. Air and fuel mixture. The fuel mixture is sprayed in a vaporized form into the combustion chamber, along with the air and the compression. The combustion in a diesel motor is from pure compression. There's no spark plugs. This explosion propels you down the road because that explosion forces a piston down, turning a crankshaft that's attached through the transmission, drive shaft, etc., to the rear wheels, and that's what propels you down the road. The engine retarder does the exact opposite. The fuel is shut off, and as this piston goes up and down inside the motor, the exhaust valves are closed rather than open. So normally with the exhaust valve open, the piston is taking the spent exhaust fumes and spewing them out into your exhaust. The engine brake closes those valves. Not 100%, but close. And now that piston can't push the fumes out and has a lot of resistance. That acts as a brake on your drive wheels, okay? So it literally brakes, not with brakes, but it brakes, has the same effect of forcing these wheels to slow down back here, okay? The engine brake was invented by a Cummins engineer in 1960 because the brakes on these trucks are so inadequate. We are to this day on most trucks and trailers using drum brakes. Drum brakes suck. None of you drove a car today with drum brakes, at least on the front. Maybe you had drums on the rear if it's an old enough vehicle. But your front brakes are disc brakes, aren't they? Now, the higher end trucks are starting to come with disc brakes, and you can special order a trailer with disc brakes. But most of the industry does not use disc brakes. I think they're foolish because disc brakes are far superior in a lot of circumstances, one of them being a long, steep downgrade. If you use your drum brakes too long for too great of a distance under a severe load of a hill and a heavily loaded vehicle, what happens to those brakes? They heat up.
Stop working.
They stop working. They fade. They heat up to the point where they quit working. And then you crash your truck. Well, that was happening back in the 50s. And so this Cummins engineer invented this device to flip a switch, turn off the fuel, and cause the engine to serve as a brake rather than a propulsion device. So it's called an engine brake, engine retarder. Cummins licensed this device to the Jacobs Company, and that's where the nickname comes from. So the Jacobs Company licensed this thing to Caterpillar, Detroit, International, all the other manufacturers, okay? So that's where the nickname Jake Brake comes from. Now, okay, so let me get to that in just a second. So there is a switch on your dashboard to turn this on and off. In the on position, it only works when you take your foot off the throttle. It only works with your foot off the throttle. If you're going down a long steep grade, you want to be at a reduced speed when you start, at a reduced gear when you start. Then, with a fully applied engine brake, in most cases, you won't need the brake as you go down the hill, the brake pedal. You won't need it. If the engine brake is engaged in the proper speed, proper gear at the top of the hill. They are adjustable. Some of them have low and high. The bigger trucks will have low, medium, and high. That's so you can adjust for terrain differences as you go down the grade. My pickup truck has a single position. I don't get to adjust it, just an on and off. The minute you touch the throttle, it kicks it off. The minute you touch the clutch, it kicks it off. So the throttle has to be off, clutch released, switch on, okay? Now, because this is affecting the exhaust valves, those drivers that like to remove their mufflers have a very loud engine brake. You've heard it. And that reverberation, that's literally the exhaust valves bumping up and down. As this piston is trying to force the exhaust out, it reaches a point where it pushes the exhaust valve open, relieves some pressure, the spring pushes it back down, more pressure pushes it up, relieves the pressure, back down. So there's literally an exhaust valve in this motor doing this, causing that. If you have an original equipment manufacturer's exhaust system, you'll barely hear the thing. It's not a problem. But there's so many of these people that think a loud exhaust is a good thing. And Aunt Bertha lives right next to the highway. And when these clowns use those engine brakes with the open exhaust, her china literally vibrates off the shelf onto the floor. So Aunt Bertha has gone to the city council and that's where it's prohibited in areas where there's residential communities because of the noise. Now, there are two different types of signs. Noise ordinance enforced, that's a good ordinance. Jake brake prohibited, that's a lousy ordinance, okay? I will use my engine brake in places where it says no engine brake allowed because I have an original equipment exhaust system. I'm not going to cause Aunt Bertha any discomfort, and no trooper's going to give me a ticket for it. So keep that in mind in that equation. Now, since this is a braking effect on your rear wheels, how many of you remember in your younger days when it snowed and you snuck out of the house in the evening and found yourself a nice big parking lot? Remember that? And what'd you do in that parking lot when it was snowing? And how'd you get the back end to kick out and spin around? Or use the parking brake, right? So causing a lack of traction on the rear wheels will spin it out, cause a skid. So the answer to the question is retarders will keep you from skidding when the road is slippery. The answer is false. The manual will say you should not use your retarder when the road is wet, icy, or snow covered. I disagree with the wet part of it. If it's raining and I'm loaded, I'm using my engine brake, and it's not going to be a problem. You will have plenty of traction You won't have a problem with reduced traction when loaded in a big truck just because it's raining. So I'm going to use it then. Snow covered. Well, you have to make a decision as to whether you should be driving in the first place or not. If we're talking about a March snowstorm where it's 34 degrees outside, I'm probably going to keep going, and I'm probably going to use my engine brake. But if it's a January snowstorm where it's 5 degrees outside, you know where me and my truck probably are? Parked. And the same is true for certain when the roads are icy. If there's ice out there, I'm parked. I am a very conservative driver when it comes to inclement weather conditions with these large vehicles. I'm much more assertive, let's say, with my personal vehicle than I would be with my big rig. We have a perfect safety record here. I've operated this business in excess of 21 years with 0 collisions. We've operated every single winter. How we've gone every single winter without putting a truck in a ditch, without losing control, without being in a collision, because we're conservative with how we do it. If it's snowing, I'll tell my staff, okay, you can drive around in the flat right here. So here in Hudson, yep, you can drive around in this neighborhood, but don't get on the ramp getting on the freeway. I don't want you on the freeway when it's snowing. In South St. Paul, okay, drive around here in South St. Paul. Don't get on the freeway, don't go up any hills, don't go down any hills. And then if it gets icy, we pull everything off the road. Simple as that. As some of you know, I race cars. To this day, I race cars. And the racing that I do, road racing, we race in the rain. I love racing in the rain. You're sliding all over the place. It's a blast. So I have a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing going on here. There's a time and a place where I'm very aggressive and taking risks. And there's another place in my life where I make 0 risks my priority. Make sense? So be careful when the roads are slippery. All right, before we finish, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to cdltest.co and show you some of these practice tests real quick. And you can access this through our website. So let me show the people back in South St. Paul what this looks like. So here's cdltest.co. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to do Class A license part 1, 100 questions. And all of these questions come right out of the manual. Question number 1, coffee and a little fresh air will help a drinker sober up. False. Question number 2, empty trucks have the best braking. False. Question number 3, what factors determine your selection of a safe speed when going down a long, steep downgrade? We have the option of length of grade, steepness of grade only, weight of vehicle and cargo. Third one is weight of vehicle, cargo, length of grade, steepness of grade, road conditions and weather. That sounds right, but let's check the last one. Total weight of vehicle, steepness of the grade and weather. So it's the third one. Okay. All vehicles with air brakes must have a low air pressure warning signal. That is true. What is hydroplaning? Options, a term used for quickly planning an alternate route due to heavy rain. Second one, when tires lose contact with the road and have little or no traction due to water on the road. That sounds right. The amount of traction a truck has due to the weight of the vehicle on a slippery surface. Or last, a water spill in the road that came from a water truck. It's the second one. Stopping is not always the safest thing to do in an emergency. According to the manual, that's true. I beg to differ, but I'm not going to get into it. Now, which of the following is not a common cause of vehicle fires? Here's that negative question that I was telling you about that messes me up. And for the sake of discussion, let me show you something here. Let's say that you've got a question like this and you're confused. You're not sure what the answer is. Do this to find the correct answer. Experiment with it. Let's try the first one. Sorry, wrong answer. Use your back button, go back to the question. Try the next one. Sorry, wrong answer. Go to the back button. Loose Airlines. You are correct. So I found the correct answer, right? Now here's what I'm suggesting you do. Go back to the question one more time. This is a question that you were confused by, right? You found the correct answer now. So here's what I suggest you do. Take your phone and take a picture of that question. What is the purpose of doing that? Now you have the perfect study guide for questions that were confusing to you with these practice quizzes. So when you pull up into the parking lot prior to going in to take your permit test, dig your phone out and find the questions that you found to be confusing for you and review them on your phone before you go in for the quiz. How good of an idea is that? Pretty cool, huh? These are fantastic devices. When I was a teenager, one of the kids I went to school with, his dad was president of Control Data. The first computer they had was the size of this whole building here. And it couldn't do what this can do. Amazing.
Said it's more smart power on these phones than it was with the first space shuttle.
I believe it. Amazing. The amount of technology in these little phones. All right. Take the test your knowledge boxes, find the correct answers, highlight that information in your manual. Use cdltest.co for practice tests. Questions that are confusing, experiment with it to find the answer, then take a picture of it so you've got something to review. Any questions? All right, that's my class. Sorry for the technical difficulties to get things going, but that'll do it for today. I'm Bill Collins, Interstate Truck Driving School. Have a good day. More important, have a safe day. All right.